So this is Christopher Bram, okay,
Hi.
joining us from New York City. I don't know. He's my friend, writes lots of books. He teaches at Gallatin, right?
Yeah, at Gallatin School at NYU.
And just got back from Costa Rica.
Yep.
I don't know. What else do you want to share with the class?
It's cold here, but there's no snow. Is there snow up there?
Not a lot. I mean, for Buffalo, not a lot.
For Buffalo, okay. Yeah, okay.
Also, don't you have a fun fact about Buffalo?
I was born there.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, it was my father's first job out of college was with a chemical firm in Buffalo, and he lasted only one winter, long enough for me to be born, and then he moved from there. So, but it was great. On my birth certificate, it says born in Buffalo, New York. So I'm quite proud of that.
So you see, Buffalo is actually everywhere.
Okay, and here's Michael.
Michael, nice to see you.
Hi.
So on the bottom of our screen is Michael Nava. And I'm assuming it's much warmer where you are than it is where we are here in New York.
It's 65 degrees.
Oh, how sad to have to deal with that. So I know they all have questions because they wrote them in their discussion posts. So anyway, so these are my friends, Michael Nava and Christopher Bram, and we've just finished discussing Lies with Man, and last week we discussed gossip. And it's your turn. Talk to them. But if you two have anything you'd like to preface this with about what you're doing now, or yeah. Otherwise, we can go right into questions. Any thoughts?
I think let's go right in the classroom. Yeah, let's jump right in. Yes.
All right, so I did have a list of your questions, but I hope you remember your questions. So who's going to be the brave person to go first? All right. Now, if they can't hear you, you might have to come to the box. Can you hear him?
I can't. No.
Okay.
This one's for Michael. In Lies with Man, would you say that Henry Rios is like a reflection of any of your experiences in an actual courtroom?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was a trial lawyer for a while, so a lot of yes. Yes, I would say that.
Okay. Any specific examples, like maybe something from Lies with Man?
Well, I think at the beginning of that book, he goes into a hearing, a pitches hearing. And that's where a defendant is seeking the arresting officer's personnel records to see whether there have been any claims against the officer for excessive force or other misconduct. And certainly, I mean, when I was a prosecutor, not a defense lawyer, and I handled a lot of those motions when I was working in Los Angeles as a prosecutor. So that's all from my actual experience.
Okay. Thank you.
Michael, in your professional life, you were a prosecutor. How did that impact writing from the perspective of a defense attorney?
Well, I mean, there's really not much difference in terms of the legal issues. There, you're just on the other side of the issue, but the issues are the same. If someone is moving to suppress evidence because the defendant wasn't Mirandized, say, it's the same issue. In terms of defense lawyer psychology, I knew a lot of defense lawyers. I worked with them every day, and I got a fair, and I still know several people who are criminal defense lawyers. So I got a fairly good read on how they think. And they're a lot more cynical than Rios is about their clients, frankly. He's a little more idealistic.
I think that was a comment that the class noticed about Henry being a bit more optimistic, maybe, in his outlook. All right, who's next? The ice is broken, so. Okay.
My question is for Christopher. I was wondering if, when you started writing gossip, if you already knew, how you're going to end it, or if the resolution came while you're writing.
Okay, the question, did I know how it was going to end? Yes, I did. I had wanted to do, I originally blocked it, first thought of it as a screenplay. So I blocked it all out. And most of my novels I found, I will kind of find them as I go along. With a mystery, I felt like I needed to know everything in advance. So, and I wanted to write a novel, a mystery where there were too many suspects. But I knew who did it before I even started writing, because I thought that would be something very primal and unexpected. Although at the same time, when I was sure, oh, people will see this from a mile away. And then I was surprised when they didn't. But yeah, I had planned in advance at who it would be. And although I also writers can be very perverse. At one point when Ralph is kind of let go and released and the charges are dropped against him, part of me was tempted to leave it completely open-ended and not say who did it. But also part of me, the rest of me was, oh, come on, that's crazy. You've got a great killer here. It's really important. Let's go ahead and use it. And I did. So.
Thank you.
But generally with my other books, I don't know exactly where it's going to go. And I have to write it to find out what happens. But this one I knew.
Oh, come on, don't be shy. They're not going to bite you. Okay, Taboo.
My question applies to both of you. I was just wondering what you hope to achieve with writing these novels, given how society already is and who your target audience was.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Can you get a little closer? Yeah.
So I was wondering what your target audience was when writing these novels and what you hope to achieve given like what society already is. And it applies to both of you.
You go, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Basically, I write the story just to tell the story. I'm not really very conscious of who my audience is. It's hard enough to write the damn things in the first place without imagining who's going to read it. I mean, I admit I'm always have aware it'll be most of the readers will be gay or at least gay friendly, or they won't even have picked it up. And that also keeps me honest. I have to put in things that people will go, oh, I know that, or I've been there, I've seen that. But beyond that, and what it will achieve, my unconscious kind of dictates the story, and I just kind of go with it. Sometimes I'm kind of startled over the stories I come up with. I'm going, oh my God, what will a straight audience think of this? And I said, nobody straight's probably going to read it, so don't even worry about it. So. Michael?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not, especially as I've gotten older, I really don't care. Whether my books are read or not, I write them because I think they need to be written, and I write them for myself and for anyone to whom they might speak, but I'm not really concerned about whether they are. Unlike Chris, I don't make my living at this. I've never had an economic interest in that, which has liberated me to write the books that I've written.
Thank you.
I might also add, I write for, like Michael, I write for myself. I also write for a few close friends. I mean, I know they will read it, and I think they will get a kick out of it. But only so far as it kind of, oh, so-and-so will enjoy this joke, or so-and-so will understand where I got this from. But I can't remember it ever kind of blocking me, because like I say, it is hard enough to write the thing in the first place without worrying about how people will read it.
No.
My question is for Mr. Nava. I was wondering if Daniel wasn't killed, how do you think he would have voted in the election? The proposition.
Sorry, if who hadn't been killed?
If Daniel hadn't been killed prior to the election, or not the election.
The vote on the
the vote-
proposition.
The vote on the proposition. How do you think he would have voted?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. We're talking with Lives with Men. I was thinking about the card with bone. So how would he have voted? I think he probably would have voted against it. Because any reasonable person would have understood that it couldn't possibly have, that it was basically motivated by animus against gay people. And I think he would have understood that. His wife would have voted for it.
Because her transformation doesn't happen until later. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. This question is for Mr. Bram. How do you think Ralph and Bill's interaction would change, if change at all, in modern politics and society? Or do you think that they'd still suffer the same tragic fate?
Okay. How would Ralph and Bill? What would it be like for them today?
Yeah.
Good question. Sadly, things have not changed as much as I would have hoped they had. I mean, the book is over 20 years old, but a lot of these dynamics are still here, and even weirder. I mean, now, despite all the kind of improvements in gay life and acceptance, the Republicans still make it kind of one of their main platforms. Could Bill write for the Republicans now? I would hope not. But I don't really know. And we see how to be gay and to work for the Republicans, you have to be a little crazy. I mean, look at George Santos. He's really he's just crazy. I mean, he's insane. There's no other way to kind of explain his behavior, but it didn't used to be that way. Back in the 70s into the 80s, you had both Republicans and Democrats were equally anti-gay. So you could actually have some gay Republicans who did good work, but not anymore. So I don't, it's a good question. And I really don't know how to answer it, because I don't think the difference would be, would Bill still be doing the things he's doing? That's, and I would hope not. Because Bill is an opportunist. He's met the right circle of people. And one would think he'd be more aware now. Okay, Bill's story is based on somebody who really existed, who actually turned out much better than Bill did. There's a man named David Brock, who was basically a Republican hitman writing in this was in the 90s. And he did a really ugly book about Anita Hill. He did, and then he kind of outed himself on TV. It was, or no, it was an interview. It was Frank Rich wrote an article, and Frank Rich said something that sounded like he was saying Brock was gay in code, and Brock accused him of outing him and said, "Yes, I am gay, but that has nothing to do with my politics." And Frank Rich was, "I had no idea you were gay. That's not what I was implying," but it kind of changed the. It's very dramatic, and I immediately wanted to use it in a novel. I thought it was such a great twist. The thing is, then Brock went on to, he'd been hired to write a biography of Hillary Clinton. The publisher, everybody thought he would do a hit job on her the same way he did on Anita Hill. And instead, he wrote a book defending her. And the Republicans all turned against him. They people were telling him, we accepted you being gay, but we really didn't like you being gay at all. And they turned against him. And he writes for the Democrats. Very, was it Media Matters? Michael, do you remember what the organization he was an important part of? He changed sides. He woke up and came around. I mean, it was, this all happened long after I wrote my novel, and I was kind of, gee, I wish I'd seen that plot twist coming. That could have been really interesting. But it was, as they say, truth is stranger than fiction. And David Brock came around. He woke up. Maybe Bill would have too if he had been murdered.
This question is for Michael. I guess it's a bit broad, but how do you feel we could correct the justice system to be a bit more fair and balanced? And do you even think that's possible?
I'm sorry, so the question is, how do I feel about the criminal justice system? How could it be more fair and balanced if possible? Is that it?
Yeah.
Thank you. No, I don't. I practiced law for 34 years. And for most of that time, I worked for appellate judges in California, including 15 years at the California Supreme Court, where I worked for one of the justices. And the problem is not with the people in the system, it's with the system itself. The criminal law is essentially exists to protect property and white people. So it is it doesn't really serve the purpose of obtaining justice. It serves the purpose of maintaining the status quo, which, as we know, is inherently racist, homophobic, and homophobic. So, I mean, that's my view after 34 years of practicing law, that that the legal system reflects the culture. The culture itself is so deeply racist and homophobic and misogynistic that it's impossible for it to consistently deliver just results.
Thank you.
Sorry. Maybe your generation could figure it out.
This is a question for both of you, and it kind of goes with what Chris mentioned at the end of his talk earlier. If you were to publish your novel today, what would you change about it? whoever wants to talk first, then.
Well, mine was published 2 years ago, so I think I'm gonna pass this to Chris.
I think I don't know if I would change anything, actually. I mean, I had to change some of the technology. I would make the Republicans even crazier than they are in the novel. Because I mean, it's for them to do what they're doing and make the claims they're making. I mean, I'd have them both crazier, and I'd have Bill having second thoughts. In the novel, he doesn't really have time to have second thoughts. He's successful. He's kind of enjoying his success. He's young. He hasn't had time to have doubts. If I was doing it now, I'd probably have him have doubts and then still get killed, because that would be just more dramatically interesting.
My question is for Mr. Nava. In the end, we see Josh's dad visit him after the standoff. Was he forced to go there by his family, or did he choose to accept his son a little bit, even though he didn't show it?
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing the questions. Could you repeat that for me? Or
Yeah.
Richard, could you tell me what that question was?
You can, let's try to repeat a
Yeah.
second. Yeah.
In the end, we see Josh's dad visit him after the standoff.
Okay.
Was he forced to go there by his family, or did he choose to accept his son a little bit, even though he didn't show it in the novel?
I think he was motivated by concern with his son, concern for his son. In his own way, he loves his son, but he's never able to accept his homosexuality. And that becomes even clearer in one of the later books, The Burning Plain, where after Josh dies from AIDS complications, spoiler alert, Rios, Josh's parents actually sue Rios to prevent him from carrying out Josh's wish to be cremated. Because they say Jews aren't cremated, and it's just really, no, they never accept their son's homosexuality.
Thank you.
Question for both of you. Was there any specific life event that kind of triggered or influenced your writing of these novels?
You want to take that, Chris?
Okay, yeah, I'll go first. Just a friend of mine was working as a speech writer for a senator, and I was visiting him, and it was a hymn, and I thought, I was just fascinated by the world of speech writers on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. And that fed into my decision to write the novel and the point of view. I visit friends in Washington, D.C. all the time, and it's very different from New York, and I'm kind of fascinated by it. That fed into it. But just what was going on politically, I mean, I wanted to write about what was happening. And at the same time, I wanted to write a mystery, but it was kind of like, what would it be about? But then I thought, it's a good way I could write about politics using a mystery as the technique. So it was kind of my meeting my friend Jim and talking to him that kind of was the personal trigger that drove this. I've never been involved with somebody whose politics were radically different than mine. But I guess I do wonder what it would be like. But I'm trying to think of anything else that fed into it. But I just spending time in Washington, hanging out with Jim, meeting the senator, was Patty Murray. Later, when the book was published, Jim laughed, said, I'm honored you turned me into a lesbian. It's quite very flattering. Thank you. So, but he understood how novelists work, so he didn't want, he actually enjoyed the kind of becoming a whole new person.
So, although the novel Lies with Men is set in 1988, or is it 86? I forgot. Anyway, it's set in the 80s. The reason that I wrote it now is because we've seen this continuing rash of anti-LGBTQ legislation, the Don't Say Gay law in Florida, the savage attacks against trans people in places like Texas. So this whole revival of Republicans attempting to enact laws that serve no other purpose except to try to drive us back into the closet and make our lives as difficult as they can make them. And my point is, in writing Lies with Men, is that this is not a new story. The proposition that's in the center of Lies with Men, which would have allowed health officials to quarantine people with HIV/AIDS, was an actual initiative that was proposed in California not once but 3 times. So, I feel at this point in my life, as a gay man, as a writer, part of my job is to remind people of your generation that what you're confronting now, what queer people are confronting now, we were confronting 40 years ago. And that, contrary to, I think, the belief of many straight people that, gays have marriage and they can serve in the military, so it's over for you. They won. We've not won. It's a continuing battle, and all gains can be reversed. And in fact, that, I think, is what members of these Christian bigots and right-wing Republicans are overtly engaged in, an attempt to reverse the rights of LGBTQ people, just as they successfully reversed the rights of women to personal autonomy by, persuading the Supreme Court to overturn Roe. I'm going to stop. I'm going to interrupt. So Richard sent us some of your questions, and I wanted to address a couple of them that seemed to me really crucial. And I'd like to hear, of course, Chris's opinion about this too. So one of them was, in your experience, what is an aspect in the queer community that you think is most misconstrued? So I think that then this goes back to what I was just talking about, that this goes back into the 70s. So when heterosexual people think about us and the rights of LGBTQ people, what they think about is sex. And usually what they think about is sex that they find kind of repellent, 2 guys fucking each other or blowing each other. Lesbians, they don't think about, because lesbians are a staple fantasy of straight men, and also for some reason seem less threatening. But gay men, when you talk about the rights for gay people, gay men specifically, I think what people think about is sex, and they say, well, this is just about the right of guys to blow each other. And that, I think, has really impeded the progress of queer people. So the point that I want to make is this is in fact, in part, a movement for sexual liberation, but not just for gay men, but for everyone. but more broadly, it's a movement of human liberation, because it's a movement about accepting your deepest sense of yourself, being able to live a fully integrated life. And that should have resonance for everyone. So, you know, my friend Richard Davidoff and I wrote this book in 1994 about gay rights, and we coined this phrase, the ick factor. And, you know, that's, I think it continues to be an issue even now, that even some of our straight allies, you know, they're slightly repulsed by the idea of men having sex together, and that really affects the way that they see our struggle. Chris, thoughts?
No, I agree with everything you're saying. Although I haven't, it's, one of the things I find just bizarre about the new Republican anti-gay, anti-trans position is that in my own life, in my own family in Virginia, people have changed. They are not as afraid. They are more matter of fact. They know how it was different for my parents' generation. I mean, but my parents are no longer with us, and they are, but my siblings are much more open and accepting and more matter of fact about it, because they also know how weird their straight friends can be. So they didn't know it's not just, so I find it bizarre that we are back to where we were back in when you and Robert Davidoff wrote your book. It's with the ick factors. Haven't we grown beyond that? But now the kind of the horror has been turned on trans people, a very small population, but very vulnerable now because they've become the bad guys. The ick factor is directed at them, and in ways I just don't understand. I mean, now and then a Republican will break through and speak common sense. Was it the governor of Arizona who they're terrified of cross-gendered people in a sport of men who become women performing in female sports, and they passed a law against it. And I was the governor of Arizona, who's a Republican, said, "Look, we're talking about two people. You are passing a whole law to keep two kids from playing sports with their friends. This just makes no sense at all. It's cruel and unnecessary." And he vetoed it. The legislature then overrode that veto. But so yeah, the it factor has shifted over to trans people, and it's like they have to have somebody to hate. And many of them now, they have gay friends, they have gay family members, so they know that. So it's not as bad as it once was. But now it's turned elsewhere. It's turned to trans people.
I would say, I mean, I agree with you, except that I don't think that gay men have been let off the hook. I mean, this whole vocabulary of grooming,
Yeah.
you know, that we heard in Florida, that gay people groom young people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that goes back to the 50s when all gay men were assumed to be pedophiles, and that's code for that.
Yeah.
They are saying, when they talk about grooming, they're saying gay men want to fuck little boys.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that resonates. I mean, your family's changed, my family's changed because they know who we are.
Yeah.
But there are many families there are many people who don't know queer people who are susceptible to these stereotypes, and I think still buy into them.
Yeah.
And I think the other interesting thing is that Robert and I made this point 30 years ago, that homophobia, transphobia is deeply rooted in misogyny, which is contempt and hatred of women, because the targets of homophobia, as I said earlier, tend to be gay men rather than lesbians.
Mhm.
The targets of transphobia tend to be trans women rather than trans men. And I think in both cases, it's because we are conceived in some way as being gender traitors. You know, gay men, because they allow other men to penetrate them, are playing the part of the woman, and that is somehow and women are inferior to men. Trans women who are men who've transitioned into women are, all they want to do is to get into women's bathrooms and assault women. And I think, again, they're also seen as gender traitors. So I think all of these things are related. And what lies beneath the contempt for LGBTQ people is a contempt for women. And it's all of a piece.
I had a question for Mr. Nava. I was wondering what the significance of Larry's character was, and if he was like meant to serve as like a fatherly figure to Henry. I was also wondering why like Henry's father wasn't really mentioned in the story.
I mean, so what's the significance of Larry? So, yeah, he's not exactly a father figure. Older brother, I suppose, if you're looking for a family analogy. But so he's Henry's sponsoring Alcoholics Anonymous, and this is a little bit of inside baseball. Sponsors in Alcoholics Anonymous, their main function is to reflect back to people. It's basically to call people on their bullshit and to cut through the rationalizations and the self-justifications and try to get people to see what is actually going on with them at any given moment and to address that. So I mean, it's kind of a therapy, it's kind of a therapeutic relationship, although Larry's not a therapist. It's kind of he's kind of a spiritual advisor. It's really his role is to make Rios, is to hold up a mirror to Rios and make him see himself, and to cut through his rationalizations and to cut through his confusion. He's a friend.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions?
Could I raise another question that someone asked that I thought was really interesting for both of us?
For sure.
Okay, what purposes do the sex scenes hold? Is the novel supposed to have an erotic feel? I think this was actually, I haven't read Gossip since it came out, Chris, I apologize. But I don't remember there being a lot of sex in it. Was there?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this question was actually directed at you, but I also have some thoughts on it.
Okay, well, okay, I haven't read Lies with Man yet. Is there much sex in there?
Not overt, not overt.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, I'll go, yeah, it's, writing it just seemed like a natural, I mean, these two men meet for sex. I mean, it's, and it's a bond and it's kind of a, I just wanted to make that real. And even though they have nothing in common politically, they do get along very well sexually. They enjoy each other's company in bed. And because of that, Ralph continues to see Bill, even though after he knows Bill's politics. And I mean, it's just kind of, it's true to the times. Somebody had asked why they met online instead of face to face. Well, it's the 90s. This was just beginning to happen. And I thought it would be a fun thing to play with. It was a new toy for me to explore as a writer. So I included that. But it's just, sex is a great way to meet people. And I wanted to include that and acknowledge that. And It's also a fun way to, two people have sex, they've just met. And after it's over, they can just relax and talk. And I always love that, to explore that. They will kind of say things to each other they wouldn't say if they were fully dressed, talking over a cup of coffee in a cafe. But it's kind of just an important thing to explore. And it's actually, it's part of gay men's life. Back then, and I think it still is. So that's why I wanted to include it and not just skip over it. It's a challenge to write a sex scene. You don't want to be silly. You don't want to be pornographic, but you want it to be it's a small human drama, and you want to capture all that when you're writing.
So there's not a lot of sex in Lies with Men. I had to get my copy of the book because I'd forgotten the names of some of the characters. But there is in the series often, and the reason that I include sex is because, I'm in the business of creating plausible three-dimensional characters. And who you have sex with, the way you have sex with that person, what you're thinking about when you're having sex, what you think about before and after, those are as much a part of the character as their political beliefs or spiritual beliefs, I think. And there are various kinds of sex. There's sex which is affectionate, and there's sex that is brutal. And I was trying to recall this one scene in Lies with Men where Theo is giving Freddie a blowjob, and afterwards it's quite graphic, and he's basically choking him with his dick, and then that's an act of dominance. That's not really about sex. It's about violence and dominance. So, sex is not just, I don't put sex in my book so that people can go jerk off in their bathrooms to the scenes. I put it in because it either develops a character or it moves the narrative along. It's intentional in that sense. I did never put sex in gratuitously. It serves a particular narrative purpose.
Yeah, when I do a sex scene in a novel, it's always something has to happen in it. Otherwise, I'll just do, afterwards they smoke cigarettes. I'll just allude to them having sex and not show it. But so much can happen, so much can be revealed. And it is, like I say, little dramas. And and if you include what a person's thinking afterwards too, that's really important.
Michael or Chris, were there other questions that you wanted to address?
I think those were the two that struck me.
Other questions from you all?
Okay.
Okay, so I have a pretty simple question. What would you define as justice?
Okay. I think I'll let Chris take that one.
I don't know where to begin. It's fairness, equity, equality. All I can respond is with other synonyms. That's probably not much help.
Okay, I'll rephrase it then. What would you describe as your utopia?
Unless there's a radical shift in human consciousness, which I don't see happening, I don't believe in utopia.
Okay, why is that?
Because people seem more driven by their fear than by their hopes. And as long as that's true, the world will be a place of violence and aggression.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, do you want to chime in about utopia?
Well, there, a related question that I was thinking about, I don't know how to answer the utopia, but so how would I like to see our country? And it kind of related. And I'm a very kind of practical, specific kind of guy. So I immediately started thinking of very specific things. Good gun control laws, a more equitable tax system where the rich and corporations pay their fair share, free education, free healthcare, police trained not to kill people. And very specific things like that. Not terribly radical, not terribly utopian, but you'd think they'd be doable, but they become very, in this day and age, they seem very radical. I mean, driving it all, and then Michael kind of hits the core of it, is that until human nature changes, it's hard to make the world a much better place than it is. But I think there are some specific things that would be easy to do, and I don't understand why they haven't happened.
Thank you for answering.
Other questions? Maybe you could both talk about what got you started writing.
Okay, Michael, you want to start?
I mean, not really know how to answer that question. It's not like I decided one day that I was going to be a writer any more than I decided one day I was going to be gay. You know, the fact is, when I was a child, as soon as I learned how to read, I loved reading and I loved words. And, you know, I wrote my first little poem when I was 7 years old. And I've just always written. I think it's not something I chose, it's something that I am. The only choice was whether to cultivate the gift or ignore it. And you know, I started thinking to myself as a writer in a self-conscious way when I was 12 years old, and I'm now 68. So, and you know, I wrote every day for years before I was published. I would say from the time I was an early teen into my late 20s, I wrote every day. And I wrote poetry mostly, and a little bit of it was published. But, you know, it was just something that I had felt compelled to do. And so, I mean, that's why I'm a writer. At this point, it's harder to do. I don't feel as compelled to do it. And but yeah, for many years, I mean, I couldn't not write every day. That was just who I am.
My situation is very much like Michael's. I think his comparison is to explain why you are a writer the same way you are gay or straight or whatever. It's kind of somehow just there. I love to read, and I love to read so much. I thought, well, maybe I can do this too. And I began to write, and I found I love to write too. And for a while in college, I thought, well, maybe I'm not a writer after all. Maybe I should be a film director, which really crazy ambition. And after a few years of kind of playing around with cameras, and I realized it's easier to write a novel than it is to make a movie. I mean, you can do it by yourself. You just sit down and do it. And so I did it. And like Michael, I was writing constantly I finally sold my first book when I was 35. And if I'd known it would have taken so long, I would have followed my mother's advice and gone to law school. But I'm glad I didn't. So I finally, but it's just, is it a habit? Is it an addiction? Is it a need? It's just a way of kind of thinking and looking at the world. And I enjoyed it. That was the important thing. I mean, it drives you crazy, but in a way that you enjoy. It's, you're never bored. It's kind of fun to solve the problems. It's fun to figure a way to get your character from one side of the room to the other, simple things like that. And now that I'm older too, it's kind of, I'm 70, I'm older than Michael, but I think I'm done. I don't think I've told all the stories I want to tell. Maybe a new story will bite me on the ass someday and I will sit down and write another novel. But right now I enjoy teaching. I enjoy working with my students. I enjoy reading their work and encouraging them. And the spring that forced me to write has been unbent, so I can kind of relax a little and just read and watch movies.
I wish I were there. I still have a couple of books that I feel compelled to write.
Well, good. I'm glad. Well, I want to read. Have you gone back to City of Palaces?
So I have a 545-page first draft of the sequel to City of Palaces, and that's what
Wow.
I'm working on. That's
I
what
want
I'm
to read
working
it.
on now.
Yeah.
Well,
Michael, after
do you want
doing
to write?
his,
How about?
his-
Do you want to write it for me?
Hmm?
Do you want to write it for me?
No, I think you will write it better than I ever could. Michael, after writing all his mysteries, his Henry Rios books, has been working on this historical novel. You published the first volume a few years ago, City of Palaces, set in Mexico at the time of the Mexican Revolution. And it's wonderful. It's just a glorious novel. And
Thank
it's to
you.
be part of a trilogy.
Yeah, and the problem is not the problem. The thing is that the older I get, the more ambitious my books got. And so this the sequel to City of Palaces, it's got like so many moving parts. And I've been working on it off and on for the last 7 years since City of Palaces was published.
Mhm.
And I'm going to try to finish it in 2023.
Oh, good. I want to read. I want to know what happens next to this family. So
I think.
Who else are you reading? Who else are you reading in this class, Richard?
Let's see, so we have this Polish film, Operation Hyacinth, which is on Netflix. I really recommend it. We're doing Who Killed Palomino Molero with Vargas Llosa. We're doing Garcia Marquez, Chronicle of a Death Foretold. What else are we doing? Let's see. Oh, The Secret in Their Eyes, the Argentine film, The Secret in Their Eyes. We're doing that. The Widows of Thursday, we're doing that. Montalban, the Spanish writer Montalban, we're doing The Southern Seas. We're doing Leonardo Padura, the Cuban detective novelist, Adios Hemingway. Daniel Chavarria, an Uruguayan, Adios Muchachos. What else are we doing? Did I get most of that? I think that's most of it. So it's kind of a global thing. We started in the US and going sort of globe-trotting a little bit.
Thank you for including us in that company.
yeah, it's great company to be in.
You join us. Any last questions for Michael or Chris, or no? Well, thank you both for joining us and, Chris, I know I just saw you over the holidays, but Michael, if I ever get my way out to Palm Springs, I'll be sure to ring your doorbell. And,
Good.
it's good to see you both, at least virtually.
Thank you for having us, Richard.
Thank
Great,
you.
great meeting this class. Thank you for your excellent questions.
Thank you.
Little round of applause.
Good seeing you, Michael. So take
You
good care
too,
of yourself.
Chris.
Yeah.
Adios, muchachos.
Adios.
Ciao.